Welcome back to the Religious Studies Project. I'm David Robertson.
And I'm Christopher Cotter, and I'm delighted to be back with my co-host David in association with the British Association for the Study of Religions and the North American Association for the Study of Religion.
Indeed, and this is our fifth year?
Yeah, coming into our fifth academic year now. It's been an eventful summer. Those who pay close attention to the RSP might have noticed that our website sort of just had a major breakdown for a while. But that is now all rectified. We've found some new hosts and everything's going to be fantastic. We still haven't got our email addresses up and running. So if you're looking to contact us, currently it's RSP editors and Ops Digest, both at gmail.com. But we should have the emails up and running in the next couple of weeks.
And we'll leave those temporary ones up for a short while after that, just in case. Let's not name and shame the server to blame, but we'll pass lightly over that into what's looking like an incredibly exciting semester coming up. We'll maybe talk a little bit more about that after what we could call the inaugural episode. And we're lucky to have once again our good friend Teemu Taira, and this week he will be talking about categorising religion, from case studies to methodology. And this was an interview recorded by Brian Fallon at the EASR conference in Helsinki earlier this summer. So I'll pass over to Brian and Teemu.
Yeah, the category of religion is often referred to as slippery or problematic. As such, scholars have sought to deconstruct the term in order to be free of its weight. But what happens after the deconstruction? Where do we go from there? How do we study particular cases? How are new groups officially recognised? What roles do scholars play in the application of the term to new groups? To discuss his work on Karhun Kansa, the people of the bear, the category of religion and post-deconstruction methodologies, I have with me a longtime friend of the Religious Studies Project, Dr. Teemu Taira. Taira is a senior lecturer at the Department of the Study of Religion at the University of Helsinki and docent at the Department of Comparative Religion at the University of Turku. His recent publications include Discourse on Religion in Organising Social Practices in Making Religion and Doing Things with Religion, Discursive Approach in Rethinking the World Religions Paradigm in After-World Religions. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what we're going to talk about today is part of a conference presentation that you presented at EASR 2016. If you just wanted to run through the idea of deconstructing the term religion, it has a long history at the Religious Studies Project. It's something we've talked about a lot, but the introduction you gave at the presentation was really useful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big fan of scholars who have written critically about the category of religion, detected its history, its origins and emergence. And many of these scholars, such as Talal Assad, Daniel Dubuisson, Tim Fitzgerald, Russell McCutcheon, Brent Nongpri, Z.Z. Smith, and many others, have argued that religion is unhelpful and thoroughly problematic analytical category. And these scholars differ in their understanding whether religion should be used at all in our analysis. And some say that it can be used for heuristic purposes in particular research. And some say that it's maybe better not to use it at all because the problems related to the category surpass the benefits of using it. And this kind of work is largely understood to be deconstructive in a sense that these scholars have detected the historical emergence of modern category of religion and problematized its usefulness. And then some scholars, actually quite many scholars, ask questions, where do we go from here? And one particular example from this is an article by Kevin Shilbrack entitled After We Deconstruct Religion, Then What? And that was published in 2013 in Method and Theory in the Study of Religion. And my approach is, in a way, my answer to that question.
Yeah. So your answer to the question, we might work through the case study of the people of the Bear. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the people of the Bear?
Yeah. People of the Bear, Karhun Kansa, we are actually talking about a very small Finnish group. They have approximately 30 members, so it's very small. It's currently a registered religious community in Finland. They see themselves as part of Suomenusko, Finnish faith. There are other groups who see themselves as part of that same faith or religion, however they want to call it. But People of the Bear is the only one that is registered as a religious community and only one that has attempted to register as a religious community in Finland. And the name People of the Bear comes from the idea that bear is understood as mythical ancestor of mankind. This is actually quite an old idea that comes from Finnish pre-Christian mythology. And in addition, they consider nature and its parts, such as places, certain stones, as sacred.
Okay.
But they don't define themselves as pagan group. They never use the term in their application, but that's how people quite often classify them. That it has some affinities with other groups that are self-identifying as pagans. And one thing that's quite important for People of the Bear is that they consider Kalevala, Finnish national epic, as inspirational for them, as well as all the things we know about Finnish pre-Christian worldviews or mythologies. So that's basically what Karhun Kansa is about.
Okay. So why did they want to be recognized, and how did that process go for them in becoming a religion, to use the term?
Yeah, Karhun Kansa applied for the status of religious community in 2012. And the case is very interesting because they first got their expert report from the committee, and that was negative.
Okay.
But in Finland, it is possible to revise the application, and then you have to adjust yourself to the demands of the committee. There are some formal requirements, but also some, let's say, technical issues that you have to use certain terms and phrase your ideas in a certain way that you will be at least considered seriously for being registered as a religious community. And obviously the revised application was much better than the first one. But what I think is very interesting in this particular case is that they also received lots of media coverage after the first negative report. And for me personally, this is an interesting case because I was involved in that media debate first through my blog post, and then it was taken in the mainstream media. And in the end, I ended up having a media discussion with the Ministry of Interior in Finland, who is responsible for naming the expert committee. And we can't really talk through the case today about all the details regarding the media coverage and nuances of the application. But in any case, in December 2013, a new positive expert report was released, and soon after that, People of the Bear were registered as a religious community in Finland. And one thing that is very interesting in the whole case is to ask why they really wanted to become registered as a religious community. And there are a couple of general benefits you get if you are registered. You may get license to conduct valid ceremonies like marriage, funerals, name-giving ceremonies, and so on. And you may become part of religious education in schools. you are eligible to apply financial support from the Ministry of Education. It's not a lot of money, but it's some. You get legal protection under the law concerning freedom of religion. And in general, you get recognition from the society. And people in the same field as well. And people usually then consider that you are not just any kind of cult or dubious group when you are sort of, you got something on paper that you are a registered religious community. But in the case of Karhun Kansa, a very interesting thing was the fact that they consider certain stones sacred. And there was this case in 2010 already in the city of Hämeenlinna, where the biggest capstone from Iron Age was removed in 2010 away from the expansion of Carl Sales Company. And in Finland there is this Antiquities Act which protects the stones, but it allows removal as long as the stone remains unbroken. So in their application, people of the Bear stated that they honor particular sacred places and bring gifts to them. And they used capstones as an example. And they emphasized that they consider capstones as sacred in their original location, because they are thought to be ancient sacrificial sites. And in Finland, only registered religious communities are able to appeal to the law concerning the sanctity of religion under the law on religious freedom. So this actually meant that this was explicitly pronounced by the chairperson of People of the Bear, Oskari Ratinen, that successful registration process may help them to make a case that the locations of capstones are sacred to them, and thus the removal would count as a case against sanctity of religion. So you can see that there were obvious benefits of becoming registered religious community for People of the Bear.
They definitely seem to be having much more of a voice when they're registered, as opposed to an unregistered community which wouldn't have that weight behind the removal of the stone. So there's definitely a big benefit there. Are there any other case studies that you think are relevant before we move on to the methodology side of the interview?
There are plenty of case studies that are useful to compare with this case and others. And if I just mention some of case studies I've done myself. So I've studied Wiccans in Finland who and their registration process. They failed in that, but that's a very interesting case anyway, because in that process, expert committee was really trying to make up their mind whether Wiccans can be regarded as religion. And I've also studied Categorising in Britain, I've done one case study concerning that, and then I've studied the Druid network in Britain jointly with Susan Owen. We co-authored a chapter on the case where the Druid network received charitable status under the religion banner in England and Wales. And even though laws are different in different countries, and it doesn't have to be about law, it can be about other institutions, for example. But many cases have clear connections even when the law and the context is different.
So these case studies, what do they teach us about methodology and using the term religion? Should we be outlining it in our articles, if for the purpose of this work, religion's going to be this, or do you think that's unuseful? Should we be using a term like faith or tradition? Where do we go from here with these case studies?
I think overall these case studies show how people make use of the category of religion, how they promote their own interests. But if we look from other direction, they also show how we are governed by the category of religion. And in studying these cases, I am highlighting quite strongly that I don't define religion in these particular cases. I study those cases where other people negotiate what counts as religion and why something counts as religion and what are the consequences of those processes. And it is quite clear that many people find it very tempting to ask in these so-called boundary cases that, well, in my definition, this is really a religion, or that this group is really not a religion. And I try to emphasize that I'm not doing that at all. Even when I was part of this media debate concerning People of the Bear, I never suggested that People of the Bear is a religion or that it is not. And I never suggested that the group should be granted the status of a religious community. I was simply trying to highlight how a society operates by using that category. But still, it is quite common that people still ask you the question that how do you define religion then? And then I have to say that, well, within this setting, I'm not. I'm not arguing that religion cannot be used and defined nominally for particular purposes, but I'm insisting that these cases, if they are studied without defining religion, are much more interesting, and I think the results are more interesting. At least that's my opinion. Of course, we can debate endlessly what counts as interesting and relevant, but that's my approach, and I try to show, demonstrate by doing these case studies that other people can see if they find the analysis interesting.
I think sometimes we get so hung up on, is it a religion, is it not, that we miss what else the case can offer. And I think in these examples, for example, the People of the Bear, the idea that their sacred stones were being moved and that idea of legitimacy is, in my opinion, more interesting. As you say, we could debate that, than whether they were a religion or not. There's so much more to these case studies than just yes or no, this sort of black and white thinking. I don't know what you think about that. So how do you think power plays into this whole matter of the term religion and naming different boundary groups?
Well, I tend to ask quite simple questions in these case studies, such as who benefits of being a religion, or who benefits of denying religiosity of a group or a practice. And I can also ask, how are we governed, if I'm trying to look at the level of state or society more broadly, not just a particular group. And I think it is quite clear that people achieve something by being a religion. But that happens within the governing structures of society. So by being a religion, you gain some, but at the same time, you lose some. When you get some concrete benefits, you are usually molded in a way that you have to adjust yourself to the criteria that is used in an institution, in law, or wherever. And that is typically so that you have to represent your group as somehow reminding of Protestant Christianity. But at the same time, you are sort of marginalized or domesticated in a way that, or as some people say, you are depoliticized in a way. So the idea goes So that being a religion definitely guarantees some privileges to selected groups. But at the same time, it distances them from the so-called secular center of society, sort of political, so-called secular power. So that's one of the main and very simple example how power is part of these, analysis of power is part of these cases.
Is there any examples that you can think of where a group really didn't want to sort of apply to be officially labelled a religion in sort of legal terms?
There are actually many cases, and even in the cases I've analysed, for example, Wiccans in Finland and the Druid network in England and Wales, there are definitely plenty of self-identifying Druids in Britain who didn't want to be part of that Druid network. So they considered it as something that domesticates Druidry, and that they lose some of the experiential nature of Druidry, and maybe lose something about the radical nature of or their self-image as being quite radical people or radical group. And in Finland, Wiccans were quite strongly divided, whether some wanted to put in the application and become registered as a religious community, and then some said that this is not a religious group at all. These who are applying are just a bunch of weirdos. They are not proper Wiccans at all. And then there are other examples like groups in Finland who don't want to be classified as religion because they, even though they may qualify as religion according to many and even most scholarly definitions of religion, but some groups just don't want to do it because that's how they are able to attract people to their events. Maybe not members, but if people for events, and because in Finland many people are officially members of the Lutheran Church, then you get to the problem of a question of exclusion, that whether you accept that there are sort of two religions or religious identities and things like that. So some groups consider it better not to go to that route and to that debate at all. So people reflect and then negotiate what is most useful for them.
So this discourse seems to be working on many levels. There's an element of power, there's an element of benefit, but also those who are kind of railing against that. I know in your presentation you sort of had like 6 big points to summarise the discourse. I don't know if you just wanted to run through that to wrap up the interview.
Yeah, we've been talking already about 2 methodological points I wanted to make. First, that we don't have to define religion in these cases. Okay, and second was highlighting that power matters. Third point is that I argue that discourses operate on many levels. So it's not simply by looking at the origin of the modern discourse on religion and modern category of religion. There are plenty of useful studies focusing on that, and they are very good, but they are mainly focusing on 18th and 19th centuries. But I think they don't tell enough about the many functions of the category of religion. So I think it's more situational and contextual issue, and that is why we need empirical case studies. And my small contribution has been to that scholarship. And then my fourth point was that I'm very interested in these boundary cases. So that is how discourses operate, by exclusion, by negotiating in boundaries. And I think it's very interesting to study when, to use Foucauldian terms, when simple utterances become seriously taken statements. So when statements are taken seriously, they become more effective. Usually they need some institutional support, whether it's in school, in law, in Parliament or somewhere else. And the point I want to highlight is that because some people say that is it useful to study these small groups, marginal groups? I'm not really studying these marginal groups. They are cases about how discourse on religion works and changes. And in my presentation, I even suggested that it seems to me that there is something like what I call a reflexive moment going on in the category of religion, that people have become more aware of the work a category of religion can do. And that is how all those debates are so topical at the moment. And religion becomes more discussed, contested, challenged, and so on. So, but that's, I think, negotiable. We can negotiate whether that is really going on, has that always been the case, and what is really the historical change in that. But I'm just putting it on the table that people can develop or criticize. And then my sixth point was sort of a self-reflective point about scholars who also produce discourse on religion. That scholars are not, and they cannot be, total outsiders in these debates. Sometimes scholars are directly involved by giving expert statements or commenting in the media something. But even in cases where scholars are not directly involved, they are sometimes referred to. So in that sense, you cannot be an outsider. And this is something that should be reflected on in the analysis, that analyzing discourse is itself a discursive practice, although it's a different kind of discursive practice. But nonetheless, it's part of the field.
Yeah.
And especially this case about people of the pair is interesting for me personally because I was so strongly involved in the public debate. But this is sort of my answer to Kevin Shilbrack's question, after we deconstruct religion, then what? We can analyze these cases.
Yeah, they're definitely very useful. And as you say, they give us so much to think about, not just in terms of are they a religion or are they not, but the benefits and the power and everything that's playing into it. Any concluding points to leave us with?
I think there are methodological tools to be developed in studying these cases. I don't think that we really need a step-by-step method on how to do these case studies. But what we need is to test and develop the theoretical vocabulary, what kind of terms we use and how we think about what kind of data is appropriate for these kinds of case studies. But I'm doing it myself, and I hope some others are inspired to do that too.
Great. I think that this has definitely given us a lot to think about, particularly in not just looking at the big cases, the Scientology cases and things like that. These sort of, as you say, boundary cases are so important in our discussion and learning where we stand as scholars. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to interviewing you next time.
Thank you.
Really wonderful to hear that interview there. And Teemu's been on the RSP a few times. I interviewed him on religion and the media a couple of years ago, so that's in our archive. He's also been a contestant. He was a contestant on our 14 to 1. That we recorded at the EASR again, that time in Liverpool.
He was also a contestant in Null Pois the year previously.
Oh, in fact, yes, that's.
Although he went out very quickly, but
yes, he was Null Pois, and Erfurt was when we did 14 to 1. And Liverpool was where we did Nul Point. And then he was also in our Religion in the UK 2011 census episode that we did as well. So
he was indeed. And he's very interested in these ideas of how the sort of data and classification work together. And this particular interview focuses on legal issues around the term religion and how it is often, in a practical sense, the definition comes from these relatively minor legal tussles, shall we put it. And so really interesting stuff about how the category works in a social context, not merely in a sort of what's often considered just a dry academic context.
Absolutely. And he's also worked quite closely with our BASR colleague, Suzanne Owen, on that issue. And you can hear her talking about that in her podcast on Druidry and the definition of religion. Speaking of the BASR, David.
And speaking of Nul Point and 14 to 1, we've just recorded our 2016 festive midwinter non-denominational special.
Exactly. It was a fantastic experience in Wolverhampton. So we'll not tell you what it was. We'll leave that for the esoteric knowledge of the people who were there, but you'll hear that. I think earlier today I discovered it would be the 19th of December.
That's correct.
We'll put that out.
And it's going to be a video, a vidcast, as well as audio this year. So we hope you enjoy that. We certainly enjoyed being in Wolverhampton for the BASR conference. A lot of RSP activity, but just a generally enjoyable and stimulating time. And we are eternally grateful to our original and still the best sponsors, the BASR.
We've got plenty more news to share with you. A bit of news is about a new series that we've got coming up for you this semester. We'll tell you more about that next week, but next week's podcast is the first in that series. It's a series produced in association with the British Sociological Association's Sociology of Religion Study Group, or SOCREL, as we'll try and just refer to it from now on. And it's a broad introduction to new horizons in British sociology of religion. So we're really privileged next week to have David speaking with the eminent Professor Grace Davey.
Yeah, and it's an interview that really sets up the sociology of religion in the British context, but also how the British context relates to sociology of religion in other countries. And we talk a fair bit about how things are different in the US context, for instance, the different methodologies that result, and also about how we need to remain cognizant of the fact that our historical and social context affects the way that we conceptualize things. And for so often, ideas of, say, secularization, of modernization that come from our specifically European context have been exported and applied to international contexts, when actually we may have been the exception all along. So come back next week to hear more about that.
Fantastic. As ever, remember we've got our social media feeds, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, and we've just passed 4,000 likes on Facebook, which is makes us wonderful wonderfully proud that this has grown from a sort of back shed enterprise and become the thing that it is today. Metaphors.
The roaring juggernaut smashing out of a shed. I'm not sure where this is going.
No idea. But yeah, remember our social media feeds. You can get in touch with us again, opsdigest or rspeditors@gmail.com. Come back later in the week for some responses for the Opportunities Digest. But for now,
thanks for listening.